You know, when we think about classical poetry, it feels kind of fixed, right? Like it's set in stone with meanings we're just supposed to learn. But what if the way we've all been taught to read it is missing the point entirely? Today, we're diving into the work of a really passionate and honestly provocative critic, Hajime Kawakami. He believed that to truly get art, sometimes you have to be willing to tear it all down and start over. Okay, so it all kicks off with this simple, really beautiful image. The line goes something like, an apricot blossom village, a lonely hamlet, a flowing stream, and then you get this final detail, Sujika no ya. Just take a second and picture that scene in your head. What do you really see? Because believe it or not, that one tiny detail is at the center of a huge debate. See, a famous writer translated this phrase as houses here and there, painting a picture of a whole scattered village. But Kawakami, he looked at this and said, nope, that's completely wrong. And his reason why, well, it changes everything. And here you can see the clash of visions, right? On one side, you've got a sprawling village full of people, and on the other, a single, solitary house with just a few rooms. It's a completely different feeling, a whole different story, and it all comes down to how you read just two little characters. This is our way into the mind of a master critic. So, Section 1, one word, a different world. This gets us to our first big idea, how a tiny bit of precision can create a totally different universe of meaning. For Kawakami, this wasn't just, a matter of opinion. For him, it was about historical fact. So, how did he prove his case? He basically became a literary detective. Kawakami dug back into the classics, and he pointed out that poets like Tao Yuanming used the character qian to describe the number of bays or rooms inside a single house. So a house of 8 or 9 ken meant one building, not 8 or 9 different houses. And just like that, the entire image flips. The bustling village just disappears, and suddenly a lonely, isolated house by a stream snaps into focus. All right, Section 2, how to truly read. But for Kawakami, this went way deeper than just getting the facts right. It was about feeling. It was about how you actually read a poem and connect with its soul. So next, he takes a look at this really famous poem by Meng Haoran. It's about a traveler who moors his boat on a misty little island. As the sun goes down, his sadness just gets deeper. He writes, "The wilds are vast, the sky hangs lower than the trees. The river is clear and the moon is near to man." And it's that last line that really becomes the battleground. So the standard way to read this is the moon approaches man, which suggests movement, right? But Kawakami fiercely disagreed. He argued it should be read as the moon is near to man. So what's the big deal? Well, everything. An approaching moon is active. It's almost theatrical, like a spotlight moving towards the stage. But a moon that is simply near, wow, that creates this vast, silent, and deeply intimate feeling of loneliness. The traveler isn't the star of the show. He's just this tiny figure in a huge, quiet universe, feeling the incredible closeness of the moon in his solitude. And that right there is the whole point. For Kawakami, a good reading isn't just technically correct. It's the one that best captures that specific, undeniable feeling, the traveler's sorrow, that's at the very heart of the poem. It's about shifting from a technical reading to an emotional one. It's about empathy. Okay, so this brings us to what might be one of Kawakami's most daring ideas, that sometimes the greatest artists are the ones who know exactly how and when to break the rules. So in classical Chinese poetry, there's this really firm rule. Don't repeat the same character in a short poem. It's considered clumsy, a sign that you have a limited vocabulary. It's a rule that most poets followed religiously, but not all of them. And this is where you can really see the difference between a master and, well, an amateur. On the left, you've got Meng Haoran sending off a friend. He repeats the characters for cloud and mountain 3 times in just 20 words, which should be a mistake, but it's not clumsy at all. It's beautiful. He weaves together his friend's ambition, the blue cloud, with his own return to nature, the green mountain, into this single, powerful image of the cloud mountain that will now separate them. Now, compare that to the poem on the right, where the character for spring is repeated 5 times, and it just feels forced and awkward. This is exactly what Kawakami was getting at. Rules are for guidance, but genius makes its own rules. So all of these really detailed critiques of a single word, a single feeling, a broken rule, They were all building up to something huge, a revolutionary conclusion, a manifesto for an entire art form. And the core of his whole argument is this concept, Nihon Yomi, or the unique Japanese way of reading these texts. See, for centuries, Japanese readers haven't pronounced classical Chinese poems the way they were originally written in China. Instead, they rearrange the grammar and apply Japanese sounds, and that creates a completely different rhythm and texture. And this is his thunderclap moment. Kawakami declares that these poems, when read by Japanese people, are no longer truly Chinese poems. They have become a unique form of Japanese poetry. And because of that, they have to be judged not by ancient Chinese rules of sound, but by how they feel and sound to a Japanese ear. Think of it this way. When Japanese artists in the 19th century started painting in a Western style, using oil paints and perspective, nobody called them failed French or Italian painters, right? They created a whole new genre called yoga. Kawakami is arguing for the exact same thing with poetry. Japanese kanji isn't a poor imitation of Chinese poetry. It is its own proud, distinct tradition. So why did all of this matter so much to him? Why all this passion? Well, because in the end, all this intellectual heavy lifting wasn't just some academic exercise. It came from a place of deep personal emotion. He analyzes this simple, incredibly poignant poem by Cao Ye. The poet is lonely, he's far from his own family, and he finds this sort of bittersweet comfort in watching the local villagers just playing with their kids and grandkids. And then, Kawakami reveals why this particular poem struck him so deeply. He was writing this very essay while his own young grandchild, who he'd been looking after for a year, was getting ready to move far away to Shanghai. He saw himself in that ancient poet's words. His meticulous deconstruction of poetry wasn't cold or academic at all. It was his way of connecting, across 1,000 years, with a feeling that was immediate, personal, and profoundly human. And that leaves us with this central, really powerful question. Kawakami's work suggests that art doesn't just belong to its creator or its original culture. It becomes ours when we read it with our own history, our own language, and our own hearts. It becomes ours when we argue with it, feel it, and ultimately make it a part of our own story.